Welcome to the NPTE Final Frontier podcast, helping one student at a time. Visit NPTEFF.com to enroll today so you can pass tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us here on the NPTE Final Frontier podcast. My name is Emily, and today I am very excited to interview our very own Dr. David Friedberg, PT, DPT. So many of you know David, and many of you know him as our course coordinator for the NPTE Final Frontier and the co-host to our amazing NPTE Final Frontier podcast, where he helps share valuable guidance, insight, and strategies to support licensure exam candidates. But now I want to dive into some things that you may not know about David, so we can really get to know one of our NPTE Final Frontier superstars on a more personal level. So, David Friedberg is a physical therapist and a graduate from Russell Sage College in New York. He currently practices in an outpatient private practice setting where he combines his clinical expertise with the strong commitment to education and professional service. He has spoken at and/or presented research at many places, including APTE Combined Sections Meeting, or CSM, NABPT Conference, the World Physiotherapy Congress, Physio E Summit, California Physical Therapy Association Tri-State Conference, and even more. And on an even better note, David was the 2024 keynote speaker for the APTA Michigan Student Conclave. He was also selected as an APTA Association Leadership Scholar for 2024. David is passionate about supporting the next generation of physical therapy professionals, as you can see by so many of these conferences he has attended. David currently serves on the board of directors for the Foreign Academic Credentialing Tools and Services, or FACS, a 401c3 nonprofit dedicated to helping internationally educated physical therapists pursue licensure and practice in the United States. Wow, that is a mouthful. He is a member of the APTA Academy of Leadership and Innovation, as well as the APTA Society Association Leadership Scholars alumni. David, thank you so much for joining us, not only on the podcast today, but as our interviewee.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here on the podcast.
We are so happy to have you here and to learn a little bit more about you on a personal note. So, with that being said, let's dive first into how did you get into becoming a physical therapist? Tell us about your journey.
So I had no clue where I wanted to be. It took me a long time to find my footing. I knew I wanted to be in the medical field, in the health sciences, helping out people. So I looked into pharmacy, I looked into dental, I looked into medical school. I did not look into physical therapy initially. I looked everywhere else. I worked as a pharmacy technician. I've worked as a chemist in a laboratory. I shadowed a DO and an MD. I worked as a dental assistant at an endodontist office. I pretty much did every single thing that you can think of that there is to do just to find out that I wanted to become a physical therapist. And I learned a lot about physical therapy. Even though I was a wrestler throughout high school and college, I didn't really know too much about physical therapy. But one day I was volunteering for the Games for the Physically Challenged, and I started talking to a few physical therapists there, and I started to gain a little bit of interest. After gaining interest, I ended up volunteering at South Nassau, Mount Sinai, on Long Island, and I put in my time over there. I racked up hours at the inpatient for the acute care, but also the outpatient setting. And as I was putting in that time working with patients, asking questions to the physical therapists and the PTAs, I learned a lot about the PT field. And then that geared my interest a little bit more. And then I ended up applying for colleges. And that led me to Russell Sage up in Troy, New York, in upstate New York.
So that is a lot of jobs, all within the healthcare field. So what would you say really helped differentiate physical therapy from all of those other healthcare professions that you've kind of dabbled in?
So something that was different was the care and the level of attention that you were able to give to those patients. Usually something like a pharmacy tech, which is the field that I was working in for the most period of time. The others were really a few months here and there, but I was prolonged as a pharmacy tech. And you have patients coming in, picking up medication, maybe a small little chat, and then they leave. When I was working for an endodontist, they come in, they get their root canals, and then they leave. And it's really not really heavy communication, not really heavily involved. So I realized that as physical therapy within that field, you do have that prolonged period of time with the patient where you get to talk to them a bit, get to know them, get to really help them through their entire life. And so that really was a big change that I noticed, a difference between that and the other fields.
Yeah, I agree. I love the amount of patient interaction time we have with them and how much time we spend with them over such a long period of time. So, with that being said, you mentioned a lot of the things you love about our profession, but maybe what is one thing you feel as though our profession can do better to help further advance the field of physical therapy as a clinician?
So, as a clinician, I think that we are doing a lot. I know a lot of people will talk about reimbursement rates through insurance companies. That has to be fixed within the physical therapy realm. But also, we have a lot of advocacy taking place right now and previously to help assist that. With the APTA, they're always going to Capitol Hill talking to Congress people about those aspects and issues that are really important to us. So I feel like something that's very important, I would say it used to be something like, I think PTAs need a voice. But guess what? They are getting a bigger voice now. We have PTAs that are actually serving on the House of Delegates now for some select states. Something that I do feel can be beneficial is more student involvement and more talking and hearing of the students and having students have a voice. Maybe it doesn't have to be a super large voice at House of Delegates, but on a large playing field. But they do need to have a voice in the game. So I think that having that would be very important. And they do have a student assembly on House of Delegates, but I think that there could be more involvement with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you brought up such a great point that the APTA is working so hard to help advocate for the profession. I just think us as individual clinicians or individual students, we need to make sure we're being a part of that, being involved in the APTA and being as involved as possible to help the APTA further build our voices. So I totally agree. Now, we've touched upon why you got into physical therapy more on the clinical side and what you think we could do better as a clinician. But let's talk a little bit more about you as an educator. What led to you becoming the course coordinator with Final Frontier? Or maybe even let's take it back one step further. What led to your involvement in Final Frontier in the first place? And how did you work to become such a voice and face within this company?
Well, I was born with it. No. um, so I started with Final Frontier as a student myself, and I always tell the students this. So I needed help passing my examination. I didn't know where to turn. So I ended up looking on Facebook and I saw that Dr. Singh was friends with one of my professors. And that made me feel comfortable as opposed to just anybody online trying to sell a gimmick or a product to somebody online. Anybody could sell anybody anything online. You don't know if it's legit, who's going to take your credit card information and run for the hills, who's going to just give you the bare minimum, who's not going to even care about you. So being able to put a face, an association between Dr. Singh and one of my professors was very incredible. And that helped me with joining Final Frontier. And then from that moment, I started to work hard. I started to just bust myself trying to improve each time, taking the exam, improve, improve, improve. And it led to, in the chat room, I started saying, I will pass. And I started encouraging other people to say, I will pass. And it all started because I saw a poem. I saw two poems. One that stands out was, so I needed help passing, and I needed to remain motivated. As a wrestler, I am very, I believe, coachable. So, and I have a heart of a lion. I will not stop. I have a lot of grit. I know that for a fact. So I saw a poem that said, it was, the devil whispers, you can't withstand the storm. The warrior replied, I am the storm. Once I saw that, I started to associate myself as a warrior. And then I started saying, I am a final frontier warrior. I'm going to make it through this. I'm going to keep on fighting for my dream. I'm never going to give up. I'm going to pursue this with every single thing that I got. And you know what? If it doesn't go in my direction, that's okay, because I'm not going to stop. That's not my mentality to stop. Especially when I want something bad enough, I will not stop. I will keep on coming at you and going for what I want. So I knew for a fact that this examination wasn't going to stop me. So as I got more involved and more active in the chat, students started to think that I was actually an educator already on the team. So Dr. Singh actually told me that they started sending me some projects to help out with, even when as I was a student. Like I was, I believe, the first person to review their app and a few other things and give feedback on it. So from that involvement, he said that once I passed, they were going to bring me right onto the team. And I said, Dr. Singh, appreciate it. Hold the phone. I got to make it through this first. So once I made it through, he held up his end of the bargain. He said he was going to take me, we were going to work together to help a lot of students all over the globe. And he was going to take me to conferences. And he took me right to my very first APTA CSM, which was in Washington, D.C. And back then with the team, it was very, very small. There was only two other people that went to CSM besides me and Dr. Singh and Derek. And ever since then, I've been with Final Frontier. So that led into me becoming a course coordinator for Final Frontier, because I've had such an involvement from Final Frontier for over 6 years, I believe now. Started in 2017. So 5-6 years over that. So being involved with Final Frontier for that long, I feel like I have gained so much as a leader to be able to lead in such a position as course coordinator. Where as course coordinator, what I do is I help facilitate communication between the team, between the students, between the guest instructors. I make sure that our schedule is accurate and adequate for students and also our team. Make sure that all the PowerPoints are ready to go for students, that they're accurate and content-wise, that they're formatted properly. I don't want to say that I have OCD or anything like that, but I do have an eye for errors. So if you send me a PowerPoint, I'm that person that will notice if there's two different fonts on slides, two different sizes. If there's an overlap anywhere, I'm going to want it centered. I'm going to want to fix it. If there is a little bit of cropping that has to be done on an image, I will do that. So I like having everything uniform. In addition to that, I make sure that everything is scheduled for the upcoming classes and the upcoming cohorts. So as course coordinator, it's really a lot of coordination, knowing when we should start enrollment, knowing when we should start promoting that. And that involves having that communication, once again, with social media team as well, looping them in. When are we planning on launching this? When are we planning on starting this? When are we planning on stopping this? So I think that is, I think that at the end of the day, I have a passion for this. I've been with the company for such a long time where I view this company as I have ownership in this. I don't actually have ownership in this, but my mentality is I do have ownership in this. My heart is in this. My soul is in this. My blood and sweat and tears are in this. And I have a passion for helping all the students. And also I have a passion for helping teammates such as you, Emily, and others on the team, where I want to see you succeed. Not just for Final Frontier, but I want to see you succeed within the field as well. just as much as I want to see the students succeed. Not for any gain of myself, but because I know that you all have that potential. From students to you, Emily, there's so much potential in there. And I love being that driving force to help facilitate that. And maybe that comes from me and my experience from wrestling. Just always wanted to be a captain and viewed as a captain and as a leader. So yeah, long story, but yeah, short question.
No, David, I love that because I think it's so important for our listeners to really get to know you on this personal level. And I want to highlight a few things you just mentioned that I think are so important to your character and just you and your experiences as a clinician and your time with Final Frontier. You brought up your drive and your determination. I think it stems much earlier on than your experiences wrestling. I think this has been you and it is deep inside of you. I don't think it's only you with sports, only you with Final Frontier. I think this is just your character at all times. And I've seen that as a Final Frontier team member, as a friend, as a student. I've seen this side of you in so many different ways. And I can say thank you not only to for me, but for so many students and team members across the board. And another thing I love that you brought up that I wasn't even that aware of was actually that you started I Will Pass as a student and you started saying the Final Frontier Warriors as a student. So these aren't just fun catchphrases that we use to try to motivate students. They started fundamentally from a student in the program themselves. And that's just such a different experience that we can tie to those words on such a deeper meaning. So I hope any student listening to this can really relate to David and his experiences and use that as motivation. And something else to bring up that you touched upon is, some of your experiences or your roles as a coordinator, it goes so much deeper than that. And anybody who has met David knows that that is just probably one of the many hats he wears with Final Frontier. I don't know when he sleeps, but he is answering phone calls, emails, student calls, team member messages at all times. He is always putting others first, which is something I always joke about with him is that he needs to put himself first a little bit more, especially when he's not eating at conferences, so that he can be running around and networking and just being there for everybody. But it is so amazing and inspiring to be able to work with you and see this firsthand. So I'm so happy you brought up so many of these things to help other students and listeners get to know some of this about you that maybe they haven't been able to see firsthand because you are the roots of this company and it goes a long way. So thank you for sharing all of that, David.
Of course. Thank you for your kind words and everything. And I guess this is why it took well over 200 episodes for me to just do an interview because I'd rather it go to you and everybody else before me.
Of
Um,
course. Well, it was
so, of
well worth
course.
the wait. Now, while we're on
Yes.
the topic of everything you do for students, team members, your involvement, what is one piece of advice you feel as though you should give any physical therapy student or physical therapy assistant student listening right now? What is one thing you want every student to take away from this?
So I think something that I say to many students I do one-on-one ALPS tutoring and I work on exam strategies, overcoming anxiety, creating study plans, and so much more. So when I work with students, something that I started saying is move on from the past to focus on the present to create the future. So the reason I started thinking this way and saying this is because you have to move on from that past. So in regards to students, maybe it's a previous practical exam that you didn't do well on. Maybe it's an NPTE attempt. Maybe it's a practice exam. Maybe it's anything else in life. Maybe it's a bad friendship. Maybe it's a breakup. Whatever it can be. Maybe it's just a mistake that you made. You got to move on from it. Because if you don't move on from all of that, you're not going to focus on what's in front of you. If you miss what is in front of you because you're focused on something else, you're doing yourself an injustice. Because if you don't focus on what's in front of you by letting go of what's behind you, then you're not going to get what you want. you're not going to get your dreams, those goals. No matter how small they are, you will not get them if your focus is not on them. So that is something that I think is very important for every student, but also every graduate, every person out there that's been practicing for 30, 40, 50 years. Maybe not even just somebody in the physical therapy field. I think that's just beneficial for everybody to hear.
Now, I know you mentioned the ALPS classes. I know you do a lot of motivational speaking with students, and like you mentioned, anxiety strategies and things like that. Now, on this topic, trying to move on from the past, do you have any strategies or ways? Maybe you could just give us one example of ways you try to help students or encourage them to be able to move on from the past? Because I know a lot of students are probably like, okay, David, it's easy to say, but it's hard to actually do. What is one way you encourage students to try to move on from the past?
Acceptance. One word, acceptance. So something that I needed to do when I was preparing for this examination was acceptance. One of the big acceptance was I'm not going to know everything. So that's where I started saying I have studied a lot. I may not know everything, but I know enough to pass. I will pass. And I would tell myself that over and over and over again. And it wasn't because of I just wanted to say it. It was because I needed to accept that I'm not going to know everything. I have to accept that it's okay. I have to accept that I gave this my all. I have to accept whatever's going to happen. I have to also have that positive affirmation in there. So I think that the best thing that you can do to move on from something is to accept that it took place, accept that it's okay, but also accept that the best way to make it okay is to learn from it. If you don't learn from it and you just accept it, okay, that's great. You accepted it, but you're not growing from it. Once you actually learn from that, then you have that growth and you have a progression. So I think the best thing that you can do is acceptance.
I think you do such a great job at helping show students how to encourage positive self-talk within themselves by utilizing mantras or just personal experiences. And I feel like that's something even I, as a student, we struggle with. We struggle with that positive self-talk and how to not be so hard on ourselves. And just the way you are able to help guide students to being more positive and being more open and willing to, learn from their mistakes instead of dwelling on their mistakes goes such a long way. So that is definitely very helpful advice.
I'm actually going to chime in too that with the positive affirmations and stuff, I always had that because I did from wrestling that was kind of ingrained in me. I did a wrestling camp that was, uh, I forgot what it was. It was like a 24-day intensive wrestling camp in Minnesota. I forgot how many days specifically, but it was a Jay Robinson wrestling camp at the University of Minnesota. And I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from my coaches. But with the positive affirmations is my sister. This is the first time I'm actually sharing this part is I wanted her to start to hear positive affirmations. So I told her to look in the mirror and I said, I want you to repeat after me. Say, I am powerful. I am strong. I am incredible. I am, and just go on and on and on. And then at some point, I just said, I'm going to put this onto me. So when I was a student, that's kind of where the positive affirmations kind of transitioned over is that I kind of started with that and then I just utilized it to help benefit me.
No, I
So,
love
yeah,
that. I like how it all started with your family and then it just transitioned into your own Final Frontier family and all of these connections with students as well. That's so great to hear.
yeah.
Now, David, it is time for the fun question surprise. Now, for all of our listeners listening, now I'm going to ask him a question, and he does not know what I'm going to ask him about. However, he has mentioned wrestling several times during this interview, and this is a WrestleMania inspired question. Are you ready? All
Bring it.
right. If you could create your own wrestling persona, what would your name, entrance music, and signature move be?
Ooh, good questions.
So we want our
So
wrestling persona name, entrance music, and signature move.
I don't know if I could go by. So back in my heyday, I was in a backyard wrestling promotion, and one of the people that I was in a backyard wrestling promotion with is actually has made it to the WWE. So I used to go by the name of Mass Destruction. I don't think that that would be valid to utilize any longer, but I would go by. I do a pro wrestling podcast, and sometimes I use this little nickname. So I would go by Dave the Rave. I would go by Dave the Rave as a wrestling name. And for a theme song, that's a tough one. I used to choose something like Rob Zombie or White Zombie, but I kind of feel like I have to choose something more like Rocky for the new persona. Um, more motivational. So may have to do something Rocky, but if it comes to music, I could rock anything coming out there. Uh, Finisher wise, I actually have a finisher that I used to do that's called the 3DT, where it was an arm wrench step over DDT. So I would probably do a DDT variation as my finisher. But
I'm gonna pretend like I know what that means.
yes, exactly. I'll make it easy, or else I'll do like a Stone Cold Stunner. You can hit that Stone Cold Stunner on anybody.
There we go. I like that. Now, don't ask me
Yeah,
what my answers would be because I have no idea. The only thing I do know is that my signature move would be just to run around the ring as fast as possible until they get tired because that's my only hope.
you know what? That is a great way. Just crush them with your endurance.
All right, David, this has been such a pleasure to be able to actually host you as our interviewee on the podcast. Now, let us know, how can our listeners get in touch with you or find you on social media if they don't already have you?
So you can follow me on all social media platforms at David PT DPT. You can find me on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, everywhere, David PT DPT. And yeah, you can check me out over there.
Great. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Now that you heard the interview with me, here is a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. The future depends on what you do today. So today is the day that you have to take action. If you want change in your life, today is that moment where you do that change, where you ignite that change, where you start that change. Because without that start, you're not going to get that finish that you want. So start today. You are powerful. You are strong. You are a Final Frontier warrior. You will pass.
Thank you very much for listening. For more information on NPTE Final Frontier, please visit npteff.com. You can also check out all of our social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok.
Till next time, have a great day and a powerful tomorrow.